Assalamu alaikum. Today we'll start in the lesson weathering. We went back to the beginning of the book because first we prefer to take the most important lessons. Then if we have time we will go back to the previous lesson. These lessons also are important, but at least you have an idea about weathering and erosion from the last years. Actually, we will have some new information about them, like studying the factors that lead to weathering. Let's start. Weathering is the breakdown of rock material by physical and chemical processes. Here, what are the new information? The physical and the chemical processes that cause weathering. Two kinds of weathering are physical weathering and chemical weathering, depending on the factors that lead to them. From the name, physical weathering is the process by which rock is broken down into smaller pieces by physical changes. Depends on physical changes. From your previous information about from the last years about the physical and the chemical changes. Physical changes are all changes that change only the shape and the size. Only the shape, the size, without changing the identity of the substance. But the chemical it changes the identity of the substance by changing its composition. So it changes the identity, it changed the substance itself completely. But here when we talk about physical changes, we are talking about it changes in the appearance, in the size, in the shape only, without changing any of the composition. Okay, now the physical weathering also has its own factors or agents that lead to physical changes or physical weathering. What are these agents? These are the temperature changes, pressure changes, plant and animal actions, water, wind, and gravity. Let's start today in talking about the changes in the temperature. Actually, in the changes of the temperature, we will talk about something called ice wedging. To can understand what is ice wedging, we have to remember very important rule. Also, this rule you have to remember it from the last year, from grade 6. When you study the states of the matter and the changes in the states of the matter. And now all substances, girls, all substances, all the matter, without any exception, with only one exception, all the matter, when the temperature increases, the size expands. Okay? And the opposite, when the temperature decreases, the size contracts. So all rocks, when the temperature, not only the rocks, any substance in the world, when the temperature increases, the size will expand, depending on the particles that make up the matter. If you remember, we said in the solid, the particles are closer to each other. In the liquid, they can have more spaces, so the size increases. In the gas, the particles will have the greatest volume between them, so the gas has the greatest volume. Also, in the same state, even in the solid, when the temperature increases, the particles become farther from each other. This is true in all the matter. Also the opposite. When the temperature decreases, the size contracts. يعني the size becomes less, shrinks, we can say. except one substance, which is the water. Water is exception because of the polarity that the molecule of H2O has. Also this I depend on the fact that you had take this information, but only now I'm reminding you, only water, it is the opposite. And this is very clear, everyone knows. If we put water in the freezer in a bottle, what will happen? The size of the ice becomes greater, right? So when the temperature decreases, what happens? The size expands. This is the opposite of all the matter. And when the temperature increases, the size contracts. When the temperature increases, if you take the ice from the freezer, what will happen? It will become less volume. It will have less volume. So water only is the opposite of this rule. Okay, when the temperature increases, the size expands. When the temperature decreases, the size contracts, except in the water, it is the opposite. Always, girls, remember the example of if you put water in the freezer, what happens? The size of or the volume of the ice becomes greater. All matter is the opposite. That's it. So this will make it easier for you. So how ice wedging takes place? Let's talk about this part of a rock. Now let's say it starts with a small crack. Oh my God. It starts with a small crack. Then at the night, especially if it was in a desert, in which the difference between the temperature is very great between day and night. At the day, the temperature is high. During the night, the temperature is very low. So what will happen? During the night, let's say it rains. Then the temperature decrease, and the water inside the crack freezes. After freezing, what will happen to the water? The water will expand. When it expands, it will push on the sides of the crack, causing the crack to become greater. At the same time, the rock shrinks during the night, contracts. So the rock contracts, but the water expands. The rock contracts, but the water expands. Okay, next day, the frozen water will melt. What will happen? When it melts, it will become less in size. This will allow more water to fill in this space. Again, during the night, the water with the more amount of water will freeze and it expands, causing the crack to widen and widen. Night after night, what will happen to this crack? It can split the rock into two pieces. Like this. If this is repeated in many of the cracks in many places, this can cause one rock to become many small pieces. طبعا over long time. Always when we talk about these changes, we are talking about the changes that take place over long time. This is what is called ice wedging. Okay, for this lesson, I will send you, inshallah, highlights. before the end of this week, or before the end of the lesson in general. Before the end of the lesson, I will send highlights. Also, you can depend on the PowerPoint. See you, inshallah, in the next period. Thank you.